Fate was a broke, homeless negative infinity or a loser, who had been starving since he was born, all thanks to his skill of gluttony, and he could barely manage to do anything because of his hunger. But one day, after he accidentally killed a thief to protect his level 10 goddesses Gaoyet, who he simps for, Fate's secret Rizzler cheat skill system was activated that even defied the gods themselves. The anime story begins in this world, where people are born with different skills and they can increase their leveling stats over time by fighting monsters. Meanwhile, Fate is starving while he is on his guarding duty. He has been cursed with a useless skill of gluttony, which makes it difficult for him to fight as he is always hungry. The other warriors can easily climb up the ranks by defeating monsters such as goblins, which is such a new concept introduced in this and 50 other anime shows. The Holy Knights are the strongest among the all, and the trio of Velaric siblings is popular among warriors, but for all the wrong reasons. This is because they are too arrogant, and even bully an innocent man to show off their status. They head back to the castle and find Fate struggling with hunger, so they hand him a few coins as his pay for the day. But they were not done having fun, and Memel then kicks Fate on his gut, which causes him immense pain. Fate realizes his unfortunate fate as he will always be at the bottom of the barrel and treated like a pushover. Just then Lady Roxy Hart arrives and saves him from their wrath. She defends Fate's honor in front of the idiotic group of siblings, but they couldn't care less as they don't even consider Fate to be a worthy human. After they leave, Roxy rushes over to Fate and wipes off his blood. She then takes over his shift and tells him to inform her if he is bullied by the Velaric siblings again. Later that night, Fate recalls his harsh treatment as he is nothing but a loser, so he decides to not get Roxy Hart involved, as Raphael might try to harm her for protecting him. The bartender warns Fate to be careful, or else he might end up like the last guy who was brutally tortured by the ugly set of siblings. On his way back, Fate sees a couple of thieves entering the castle, so he rushes to inform Roxy, who hands over the spear to Fate while she heads in to fight off those thieves. However, one of them manages to escape. Fate decides to run away, but is worried that the thief might escape and hurt someone, so he kills the thief on his own by using the spear he had. Just then his gluttony skill was activated, and he even ends up acquiring 2 new skills, Identify and Telepathy. Roxy then rushes over to Fate, and is worried sick for him, but suddenly Fate is now able to live every man's dream as he can hear her thoughts. She tells him that she has to inform her superiors of this incident, but he tells her to hide the fact that he took down one of the thieves, as this may anger the siblings. So she offers him to work for the Hart family instead of being tortured by these ugly maniacs. He finally agrees, as this may be his chance at a peaceful life. Later that night, Fate tries to figure out the new skills he has acquired, and thinks that a stupid malnourished loser like him finally has the chance to be a warrior. The next day Fate heads over to the royal capital to buy a weapon, but all he has are 2 silver coins, so he is only left with trash options. He uses his Identify skill to assess the strength of the swords, until one black sword catches his attention. Fate resonates with the sword as it is also filthy and treated like trash, but just then the sword talks back to him, which almost makes Fate wet his pants. The sword, whose name is Greed, convinces Fate to buy him as they are both alike, and he will come in handy. Meanwhile, Memel whines to Raphael about Roxy hiring Fate for the Hart family, but he tells her to let it go as there is no shortage of replacements for Fate, and Hart and Velaric are part of the 5 great families that support the kingdom, so they shouldn't create conflict. He then tells her that he is headed to the military district, so she asks what has gotten him so excited, and he reveals that it is the study of becoming immortal. But she just bursts into laughter as she knows that it's impossible. Meanwhile, Fate's sword has learnt his name and chants it, but just then, he warns Fate of a potential attack as the sword senses danger. Just then a goblin appears, and Fate slices it in half immediately, which gives him the strength skill, and also increases his stats. But goblins travel in large groups, so he ends up killing all of them with the help of his new sword, and his gluttony skill is activated after every kill. He then realizes that his stomach hasn't growled once, which implies that he was never hungry for food, but for killings. Greed then reveals to Fate that the gluttony skills allow him to steal skills and stats without benefiting from the experience, which is why he is still at level 1. He warns Fate to hide his true skill as it defies the divine law, so he is now a one-man army with his sword. He then collects a few goblins' ears so he can get paid for the day. On his way back, he runs into a man who is escaping with a little girl, but thanks to Fate's telepathy skill he can hear the girls cry for help, and decides to follow them. The girl is tied up in an alley as she is going to be sold, but Fate doesn't want to sit back, and let someone innocent be tortured as he now finally has the power to fight back and help others. We see a sister at church narrate the origin story of this world to the orphan kids. We learn that the creator of this world is Holy Laplace, who gifted people with special skills and powers to defeat monsters. Just then one of the kids starts crying as he thinks that Holy Laplace wasn't fair to him and gave him a useless skill, which is why he was abandoned. The sister tries to console the boy, but is then informed that one of the children named Sahara is missing, who is later seen tied up in the alley. Fate waits for the kidnapper to leave and frees Sahara from her chains, but it turns out that the kidnapper never left and prepares to fight Fate. Greed gives Fate the idea to fool him by showing that he is weak and later ambush him. So Fate runs away and hides the girl. He then sees an opportunity to knock down the boxes and ambush him. Greed tells Fate to attack his weapon, and with one swift move he knocks him down, severely injuring him. He then forces the kidnapper to reveal who hired him, and it turns out to be Hado Vilaric, who is sick in the head and enjoys torturing children. Fate then takes Sahara to have some dinner and consoles her. After he has gotten her back to the church, Sahara and her sister thank Fate for saving her. He is shocked by the gesture as he has never been thanked before. Looks like Fate is going through that time of the month. He then tells Sahara that he has a weak skill too, but his dad used to tell him to laugh through difficult times so he can finally be happy one day. After his little fight with the kidnappers, Fate has now acquired the one-handed sword technique, which is his first technical skill. This can also allow Fate to attack twice in the space of one strike. Fate doesn't want to just get lucky in fights but strong too, and he is also set to start working for the Hart family from the next day. In other news, Sir Mason of the Hart family was struck down by a divine dragon in Galia. He will be succeeded by Lady Roxy, and she will take control of the Holy Knights, but the Vilaric siblings will be a pain in the ass. Fate heads to his first day at work at the Holy Knight district looking all dressed up. Just then, Lady Roxy calls out for him, and he is fascinated by her beauty. The two exchange greetings, and it is clear that they have some romantic feelings going on between them. She then takes Fate to her father's grave, who was met with an unfortunate fate, pun intended, 5 days ago when he was killed by a divine dragon in Galia. It is a continent that is dominated by monsters, and one of the major duties of a holy knight is keeping them contained. Fate feels guilty and sorry for Roxy, as she had been looking out for him despite going through her own hardships. She stretches out her arm to shake hands with him, but he hesitates as he is afraid the telepathy skill will activate like it did last time, so he distracts her. Just then, her maid Haru arrives, and Roxy introduces the two of them to each other. Fate gets used to working at the Hart Mansion for a week, where he is given delicious meals and is given several tasks. However, those meals were not enough to satiate Fate's hunger as his stomach keeps on growling. Just then Haru arrives, and tells Fate that he has been summoned by Roxy, who is waiting for him in the garden. She calls him Faye, the same nickname his father used to call him by. He gets flustered, so Roxy, being the ever-desperate woman who can't take it slow, tells Fate that he is now part of the family. It seems that Fate couldn't contain his happiness and fainted. He later wakes up that night and finds a note from Lady Roxy, who tells him to take the day off. But Fate knows that he is falling weak and faints due to his hunger, so he asks Greed about his condition. However, Greed's revelation shocks Fate to the core, as he is told that once the gluttony skill gets a taste for souls, there is no stopping it. So the more he devours, the stronger he gets, but it also increases his desire and hunger for souls. So if Fate doesn't control it, he will either starve to death or attack anyone in his path. Fate feels as if he is a monster. Greed then tells him that once his hunger reaches its limit, it will be visible in his eyes. So Fate walks over to the mirror and sees his eyes are blood-red shot, as if he is no different than a vampire lusting for blood. This means that his hunger boost is activated, so Fate decides to head out in the middle of the night to hunt. Fate's hunger boost increases the efficiency of his gluttony skill and also gives him better night vision. Fate kills several goblins, but they are not enough to get rid of his hunger, so he heads deeper into the forest and ends up killing way more than he expected to. He then spots a goblin king, and Greed tells Fate that he can acquire the health regeneration skill if he defeats it. So Fate wastes no time and attacks the goblin king from behind. The first attack injures him, but doesn't kill him, so Fate carefully follows Greed's instructions and finally kills it off. His stats increase, and he acquires the health regeneration skill, but Greed asks Fate to lend him all his stats for now, so he can also level up. Just then, Greed steals all his stats and turns into a magic bow. He then finds another goblin to attack, but thanks to Greed's new power, Fate can shoot arrows at command, and they will hit his target regardless of where he aims the arrows at. He then collects the Goblin King's ears and leaves them outside the church so they can sell it for some money. The next day, Fate runs into Roxy and is shocked to see her in a disguise. So she tells him that she is going out to town for a secret inspection and tells him to keep his mouth shut. He then heads off for his work, but she grabs him by the collar and forces him to tag along with her on her secret mission. She tells him to call her Lexi for the day so people don't recognize her, but Greed keeps on interrupting and annoying Fate. Just then, Roxy notices his weapon and asks Fate to show it to her, but he gets lost in his trail of thoughts and is worried that she might find out about his gluttony skill. He is about to drop Greed, but Roxy catches him and tells Fate to head over to the Heart Blacksmith so he can polish his weapon. Just like Fate, Greed also begins to fall for Roxy. They step out into the town, and Roxy is overjoyed by the crowd. Just then, one of the Holy Knights arrives, and the whole town is upset at his arrival. They don't seem to be popular with the public, and only have good opinions about Lady Roxy. Just then, Fate's worst enemy, his own damn stomach, gives him away, and Greed makes fun of him, causing Fate to cuss him out. But this catches the Holy Knight's attention, so Fate immediately kneels down and asks for his forgiveness. Roxy steps in to defend him, but Fate is worried that she will get caught, so Greed gives him a ridiculous idea to pretend that they are a couple. Roxy wastes no time as she acts like a 12-year-old girl role-playing with her crush. She then whisks away Fate to a dark alley. The two of them are flustered, but Roxy plays it cool. But Fate, on the other hand, is losing his mind escorting Roxy. They shop around for a bit, and Fate realizes that Lady Roxy is an ordinary girl at heart who wants to dress up and wear gems. She then asks Fate if he knows any warrior acquaintances, but their conversation is interrupted when they hear a couple of men talking about a large number of goblins being dead, and a rumor has spread that there is a monster wandering around. Fate is upset to know that he is already being labeled as a monster, and people are also wondering about how the Goblin King's ears ended up outside the church. Roxy rushes after the two men, but they tell her to ask warriors instead. Fate then realizes the true reason behind Roxy's secret inspection, which is to find the wandering monsters, completely unaware that her little boyfriend is the monster himself. Fate later takes Roxy to his favorite restaurant, and the owner is surprised to see that Fate is still in one piece. He teases the two, and then serves them some delicious food. The owner tells Roxy that he heard a couple of goblins were found with their ears still intact, which means that it is a monster since a warrior would have collected those ears to cash them out. This whole incident can also cause chaos around town and affect business. Fate feels guilty as he is responsible for this mess, since he was craving goblins one random night. Just then, his old friend walks in, and tells another rumor that the Holy Knights believe it is a monster called Lick, and are out on the hunt for him. Fate looks as if someone sucked his soul dry, and Greed adds fuel to the fire by reminding him that he recently gave away his stats, so he will most likely get killed. But he is more worried about Lady Roxy finding out about his true identity. Just then, a group of traveling warriors walk in and harass Lady Roxy, so Fate gets angry. But Roxy is not someone to mess with as she sends the man flying into the wall. They all recognize her once she lets down her hair and reveals her identity. They all kneel down and ask for forgiveness, but she tells them to get up as she doesn't want to be feared just because she is a holy knight. On their way back, Fate asks Roxy why she wasn't aware about the hunt, so she reveals that the Velaric family has been making decisions behind her back and didn't feel the need to inform her. Just then, they hear a child crying for help, so they rush to see that it's the same set of annoying siblings who are tormenting a child, and try to cover up their evil acts. Roxy commands them to release the child immediately, and orders Fate to intervene. He saves the child, and Roxy gives the Velaric siblings a scolding for not informing her about the hunt, so Raphael tells her that they thought she would be occupied with her father's death. The two then help the child find his mother, and Fate is slowly falling deep in love with Roxy. Later that night, Fate asks Greed for help in hiding his identity from Roxy, so he can hunt monsters without her finding out. So Greed tells Fate to buy a perception warping magic item which will make him look different, and conceal his identity. Somewhere else, all the Holy Knights have gathered, and are planning an excursion to Galia without letting Lady Roxy know. Fate continues his hunting, and becomes strong enough to scare off other warriors, earning him the title of a corpse. He tells Greed that he wants to hunt until he is strong enough to fight, once the Holy Knights come after him. The next day, Roxy tells Fate that she has another secret mission for him, but instead of an inspection, she takes him to the Hart family land where they harvest grapes and other fruits. They stop at her family's mansion, and Roxy's mother comes out to greet them. She introduces Fate to her mother, who seems to be very welcoming, and asks Fate to step forward. She then asks him if he likes Roxy, but later clarifies that she is asking his opinion as an employee. Fate kneels down and expresses his care for Roxy and vouches to be with her till the end of his life. This sudden declaration makes Roxy flustered, and she runs inside from embarrassment. Her mother, on the other hand, is very pleased with Fate's response. Lady Roxy seems to miss her father and recalls her early days of training with him. Later that day, all the workers including Fate collect grapes from the Hart family land. It is revealed that Roxy visits every year during the harvest season so she can help out, and also hunt down monsters as they tend to come out looking for food during this season. Fate is told about a different breed of monsters called kobolds, and his stomach immediately growls. Greed reveals that Fate is fed up with hunting goblins and is now craving for a different kind of soul. As Fate was heading back, he ran into an odd woman whose eyes are the same color as him when his hunger boost kicks in. She tells Fate to have the kobolds for himself, and now he owes her one. Shortly after, Lady Roxy arrives and tells Fate that the odd woman seems to be a Galian. He is shocked to learn of this as Galia was destroyed, but Roxy tells him that it was one of the strongest continents because of its military power, but later got destroyed as monsters invaded it. However, there were some survivors, and that girl's family was one of them. Fate then asks Roxy if she will be okay on her own hunting down monsters, but she assures him that she will be working with other warriors. They later see that the fields have been destroyed, so they head over to the kobolds' hideout, and are shocked to see a large beast among them. Lady Roxy heads back to town, and calms everyone down. Meanwhile, Fate is almost in his starvation state, and doesn't want Roxy to die fighting the beast, so he follows the kobolds and the beast later that night to hunt them down on his own. Fate wastes no time as begins to shoot arrows, taking down the entire army of kobolds, leaving the beast unprotected. However, Fate has still not satisfied his hunger and is worse than a street dog. He waits for the beast to charge towards him and then shoots his arrows, but the beast is too strong and stops the arrows with his bare hands, so Greed suggests that they get closer to him for a better chance at attack. However, Greed stops Fate midway as it sees that the beast is going to use a ruinous strike that can shatter Fate's bones, but Fate ends up getting scratched. However, he immediately recovers thanks to his health regeneration skill, but another impact from the beast sends Fate flying into the water. The beast steps closer, but Fate is no longer a stupid moron, and instead tricked the beast into thinking he was done for. Just then he chops off the beast's arm, but he is still too strong for Fate, so Greed asks for 10% of his stats to activate his hidden skill, which creates a huge impact and turns the beast into ashes. However, Fate has outdone himself by killing and devouring a soul of high quality for the first time. It's as if he has just had dinner in a Michelin star restaurant. Greed tells him to snap out of it, otherwise he would be worse off than his starvation state. The next day, Roxy and her warriors are shocked to see that someone else has done their job for them. She first suspects it to be the Galian girl she saw earlier, as they are known to be stronger than holy knights, but she doesn't give it much thought as her land is safe for now. Fate is also relieved that he helped her out without getting caught. Later that day, Aisha asks Fate to look after Roxy as she doesn't have much time left and may take off from this world anytime. He promises to be by Roxy's side, but later questions if he is even worthy of that, since he is deceiving the world by possessing a dangerous gluttony skill. Meanwhile, Roxy is assigned to an expedition to Galia, which literally means signing your own death certificate. Fate tries to stop her, but she doesn't pay heed to him. However, he knows that the Hart family is a nuisance to the other holy knights, and her life is in danger. In a change of scene, Hado and his minions have finally caught on to Corpse, but have no clue that it is Fate behind that mask, and he is ready to eliminate them. Hado's minions overestimate themselves and charge towards Fate to attack him, but he uses the ruinous strike he won over from the beast and tosses them around like they are some toys. This scares off the other warriors, leaving Hado alone to deal with Fate, who looks like he is about to piss his pants. Fate then removes his mask to reveal his identity, and this shocks Hado, as someone as filthy as Fate is stronger than a holy knight. So Fate challenges Hado to a duel. He then asks Greed if it can shatter a holy sword, and he boasts to Fate about his endless power. Hado then unleashes his holy power of the Grand Cross at Fate, but he is quick to escape it, and ends up behind Hado. He doesn't even give him time to recollect, and shatters his holy sword into 2 pieces. Hado is now scared more than ever and tries to step back, but Fate has just begun playing. He picks up Hado with his bare hands, and says his own words back to him from when he used to torture Fate for being a weakling. He smashes his head into a tree so hard that Hado begs him to stop. But Fate is filled with anger for all the times he hurt innocent lives, and now his girlfriend, Roxy, is heading into danger because of him. He then sends him flying into the air and unleashes his bloody Patragon at Hado. Once he is done, Hado has all his limbs cut off with only his upper body intact. He then asks Fate why he hasn't killed him off, so he asks him why Roxy was sent to Galia. Hado reveals that she took the lead and vouched to fight even if it was just to save a single citizen. Once Fate is done with him, he then prepares to kill him off even though Hado begs him and tells him that he will get the expedition cancelled. But Fate shocks him by revealing that this is his own revenge and pierces Greed into his chest until he is completely dead. Fate then acquires Hado's skills and is now a holy knight, but he tells Greed that he has no interest in being one. So he transfers the stats he recently acquired into Greed, which upgrades him to the 2nd level and turns him into a great scythe. The curse embedded into this blade can cut through almost anything. The next day, Lady Roxy prepares to leave for her expedition to Galia, which will last for about 3 years. She bids everyone off, but Fate doesn't want to just sit by and watch her walk into a death trap. So he quits his job and also leaves for Galia. We see Lady Roxy finally leading the army and briefing them on their mission to take down the divine dragon that has awakened after 1,000 years. A couple of warriors such as Miria and Mugen have also joined the expedition to support Lady Roxy, and also test the true strength of their powers in a hell like Galia. Meanwhile, we see Mugen's daughter Rain, who is a scholar working on the goblins that Fate has been slaying. She realizes that the wounds on these goblins are made from magic arrows, which can only be done by the Black Sword, a weapon of one of the mortal sins. So it turns out Greed is no ordinary sword, and is a big hotshot celebrity. Meanwhile, Greed has reached a town called Tetra, as he has to spend the night before heading on to Galia. He looks for a restaurant to satisfy his hunger. Just then a bunch of guys bully Set, who begs them to get rid of monsters. However, Fate fights them off and greets Set. A flashback shows that this was his hometown, and he used to live here with his dad. But after his passing, the village chief and other villagers decided to kick him out when he was only a child, since he was an extra mouth to feed. Now the tables have turned, and Set, who is the son of the village chief, is begging Fate to defeat the monsters and protect his village. Greed also tells Fate to let go of his ego, as he needs to sate his gluttony, otherwise his starvation state will kick in. Fate only accepts because this was his father's hometown, otherwise he still resents the people of this village. Set's father is still arrogant as ever and suggests offering up Fate as a sacrifice until they find real warriors. But Set tells Fate to not pay heed to him and just follow him. He tells Fate that his wife was killed by the monsters, but now he is worried for his daughter. He apologizes to him for all the hurt he put him through, as he realized his mistake when he became a father. Fate forgives him, and Set then tells him that monsters started appearing around a month ago, and also have flying abilities. Greed then tells Fate that these are no ordinary monsters, as they are clever and are called gargoyles. These monsters lure humans in, and then the entire pack attacks in a swarm. Just then Set's daughter offers him some candy that the village chief gave her. But as soon as Fate has dinner, he feels dizzy and faints. Set realizes that the candy was drugged because his father wanted to get rid of him. And now it's too late, since the gargoyles have invaded the town. The gargoyles spew fire all over the village, burning every house and human in sight. Meanwhile, Fate is still out cold, so Set prepares a medicinal herb which is an antidote. He serves it to Fate, which helps him recover from the effects of the drug. Fate wastes no time and grabs his sword. He is shocked to see the damage that has been done while he was napping. Greed suggests Fate to use the Great Scythe to deal with the gargoyles. Greed transforms into a scythe as the gargoyles combine their powers, allowing them to launch a massive fireball. But Fate throws his weapon, slicing through the fireball, and it pursues the gargoyles, wiping them out. The scythe returns to Fate, and he acquires the fireball skill. As the leader of the pack appears before him, he checks its stats and learns that it has the fireball skill as well as the ability to resist fire. Greed thinks that it will try to launch fireballs at close range. So as the gargoyle charges at Fate, preparing to attack, he delivers a devastating blow, slicing it in half and killing it instantly. The next day, Set tells Fate that the majority of the villagers, including his father, are dead. Fate uses his Identify skill and realizes that the entire land is done for, as the soil isn't healthy anymore. Set tells Fate that he will look for a job in town for the sake of his daughter, and as a last act of gratitude, he asks Fate to hit him. Greed advises him to do so, as they will make him feel even. Fate punches a bit too hard, but then helps him get up. He bids farewell to Set, but also stops by his father's grave before leaving this village. Meanwhile, Lady Roxy and her army are still on their way to Galia and have reached Lanchester. Fate also resumes his journey to Galia, but his carriage is stopped by a bunch of hooligans who threaten him and block his path. The carriage driver begs Fate to save him, but just then a huge blast occurs which sends all the men flying away. Turns out it is the same Galian girl from before. She then asks for a ride, but as soon as she steps into the carriage, it tips over, so she commands her weapon to shift back. This impresses Fate, and they both exchange greetings. She seems to already know about Fate and his deadly skill, but he has no clue about what her power is. She assumed that Greed must have told him about her, as she also possesses a deadly sin like him. She introduces herself as the Mine of Wrath. In a change of scene, we see the Lord of Lanchester, Rudolph, show off his skills by defeating mere monsters. Fate and Mine have arrived at Lanchester before Roxy and her expedition. However, Mine falls asleep, and Fate has to carry around her town until they can find a place to rest. Greed tells Fate that she is not a morning person, which implies that he has known her from before, but chooses to stay silent when Fate asks him further questions. Just then, Fate realizes that several people in town have different marks on their necks based on their social class. It turns out that Rudolph was just putting up an act, since the reality is far ugly. He is a ruthless monster in the form of a human who won't hesitate to kill anyone who defies him or embarrasses his family name. We later see Greed finally reveal the truth about the deadly sins to Fate. He tells him about the 7 deadly sins that exist, and were born by defying the laws put forth by the divine. The 7 deadly skills and weapons of mortal sin go hand in hand. But among these sins, gluttony has the potential to overturn the divine system of leveling. But Fate feels pathetic as he is punished constantly for having a skill that forces him to kill. But Greed tells him not to let this guilt take over him, and sustain his hunger enough to avoid reaching the state of starvation. Fate goes out to hunt again late at night, but Greed advises him to not satisfy his gluttony all at once, and work on slowly getting his fill. Fate then encounters a sandman, and Greed guides him to cast a fireball before firing the arrow. It only takes 1 arrow to kill the sandman, but just then several others appear which make it difficult for Fate to control his hunger. Meanwhile, Wrath wakes up from her nap and finds out that there is a reward for defeating the sand golem. She learns that even Rudolph isn't strong enough to defeat them, and the town is just counting down their time before death engulfs them. Fate, on the other hand, is killing these sand monsters like it's another mission in Call of Duty. Just then Fate senses a large beast, and finds that a couple of warriors are struggling to kill it, and they also warn Fate to back as he won't be able to handle it alone. He checks the monster's stats, and we learn that it has the ability to create sandstorms. He launches a fire arrow and charges in, but the monster manages to push him back. It uses its skill, creating a sandstorm, but Fate transforms his weapon into a scythe, using it to launch an attack that overpowers the sandstorm, destroying the monster's body. The monster's core tries to escape, hiding in the sand, but Fate uses his bow, launching a powerful arrow that chases the core, destroying it in an enormous explosion. The next day, Fate heads back and tells Mine that he has already defeated the sand golem, so she gets mad as she was looking forward to the reward. But Fate calms her down and tells her that he will split the reward with her. He receives 100 gold coins for defeating the sand golem, but Rudolph suddenly appears, telling Fate to serve him. He explains that Fate has no right to refuse because his decision is final. Mine tells him that Fate belongs to her, but he calls her a child, so she hits him, blowing him away. Fate knows that they're in trouble, so he tells Mine that they should leave town. As the two of them set on their journey, Fate, being the moron he is, skinny-shamed Mine, which pissed her off, so she decided to increase the weight of her weapon, which punctured the tire. They had to stop over while the tire was being replaced. Meanwhile, Mine decides to head off into a nearby town, and Fate can't help but follow after her. Fate realizes that someone powerful must be protecting this village as it is near Galia and its monsters. Just then, Fate comes across an old man who seems to be a holy knight and introduces himself as the village chief. Fate asks him if he could help him find a place to stay, but the village chief uses Identify on Fate and challenges him to a duel. The two of them exchange swords and Fate tries his best to put up a fight, but the man overpowers him, causing Fate to drop Greed. Just when Fate thought he didn't have a place to stay, the man offered to train him. He finds it sketchy that he is not asking for anything in return, but he tells Fate that he is not making the most out of his skills, which might be a problem in fighting against humans. Fate hesitates for a bit but agrees and introduces himself. The man then introduces himself as Aaron Barbados. The next day, Fate starts off with his first lesson in training. Eren teaches him hand-to-hand combat. At first, Fate struggles but soon catches up with his tricks. Mine watches them while she is starving in pain. However, as soon as gluttony kicks in and the color of his eye changes, Fate suddenly becomes faster. He spends the whole day training, but when he returns, he sees that Mine is passed out from eating. So Eren heads out to fetch some supplies for them while Fate notices that he resembles Eren's son. The next day, Eren and Fate resume their training. Eren instructs Fate to him with a twig instead of an actual sword, so he tries his best to protect himself with a twig as Eren charges at him. However, Fate predicts the sword's movement and lets the twig slide along the blade, allowing him to deflect the blow. Eren is impressed, saying Fate has improved. That evening, Fate tells Eren that they will be leaving the next day, thanking him for his hospitality. He observes that Mine is too busy eating, and she reveals that she can't taste her food. Greed mentions that this is the punishment for wrath. Eren stares at the castle and reveals that it once belonged to him. We learn that, while he was away from the castle, it was attacked by monsters, and his son Luke tried his best to defend it but ended up dying. The Lick Lord took over the castle, and Eren knows that his family is still trapped there. Fate considers going there, and Eren decides to join him, while Mine agrees to protect the village if they pay her 50 gold coins. They make their way to the castle, where Fate shoots a skeleton, turning it into stone, revealing that he used Sandstorm with his arrow to petrify the target. They head deeper into the castle, destroying skeletons along the way. Eventually, they enter a room where Eren is surprised to see his family. They tell him they've been waiting for him, and he thinks they're still alive, but Greed reveals that they are already dead and the Lick Lord is using illusion magic to make them appear alive. Luke suddenly attacks Eren, but Eren manages to block the attack, pushing him back. Luke says he despises Eren because he abandoned his family to work in the capital, blaming him for what happened to them. Fate considers using his scythe to dispel the illusion, but Greed reveals that if they do so, Fate will end up consuming the souls of Eren's family, sending them to an eternal hell. Eren says he will take care of his family, so Fate decides to look for the Lick. Fate eventually finds the Lick, realizing that its stats are ridiculously high. He manages to break its arms, but the Lick summons a group of zombies, who beg Fate to save them. However, Fate knows he can't attack them. Eren joins the fight, taking down the zombies, and sees his wife, recalling the last moment he spent with his family. We learn that they didn't want him to leave, but he promised to return after his mission. He blames himself for what happened because they wouldn't have died if he had returned sooner, but he is determined to put their souls to rest. Eren uses the Grand Cross skill, releasing a flash of holy light, but it isn't strong enough to defeat the Lick. Fate sees Luke's sword and decides to use it. Combining his powers with Eren, they use the Grand Cross skill, creating a massive flash of light, which instantly kills the Lick, freeing the souls trapped in the castle. Eren's family appears before him, telling him not to blame himself for what happened. They say he was able to save them in the end. Eren asks for forgiveness, admitting that they were more important than his duties, but his family tells him to continue serving the people. He promises to make them proud and gives Luke a souvenir as if he was on his way to Thailand rather than heaven. But now they finally rest in peace. The souls in the castle disappear, but the Lick's core tries to ruin the moment, so Fate destroys it, allowing him to consume the Lick. Later that evening, we learn that Eren has broken his level limit, thinking it's because he fought alongside Fate. However, the match isn't over and they place a bet on killing off the skeletons. We later see Eren pay Mine for her overtime duty, but also reveals that he once saw her 50 years ago. So Mine reveals that she is a phantom who is not allowed to die. As she heads off, Eren notices that Fate's eyes have returned back to normal, so he briefly explains to Eren about his condition of slaying monsters as they are equivalent to a Big Mac for him. He then tells Fate to come back once he is done with his mission. Meanwhile, we see the Velaric family has got their hands on the Philosopher's Stone, which has the power to cure any illness in the world. This implies that they might be able to achieve immortality. However, they are soon informed that their stupid loser brother, Hado, is dead, and witnesses claim that the killer was not a monster but a warrior. Raphael is hell-bent on finding corpse and avenging his brother. Fate and Mine continue their journey, but the dumbass comments on her constant eating once again. But she just shoves some in his mouth, causing him to shut his damn mouth. She then takes a nap on his lap, from which he is taken aback. He then tries asking Greed about her, but Greed still refuses to tell him anything, saying Fate will need to find out for himself. Meanwhile, Roxy's group arrives at Eren's castle, and they are amazed that the Lick occupying the castle was defeated. Eren greets them, and Mugen pays his respects. Roxy is about to introduce herself, but Eren reveals that he knew her parents and that he was the one who actually named her. They ask him about how he defeated the Lick, and he admits that he had help from a great warrior. Roxy asks for their name, but a flashback shows that Fate asked Eren to keep his identity a secret, so Eren says he's unable to tell her. Eren can tell they are headed for Galia, so he offers to give Roxy some training as her godfather. Fate and Mine arrive at a ruin, but Fate is clueless about his whereabouts. Mine casually drops the bomb that this is where she was born, like it's no big deal. They stumble across a huge cocoon, and Greed notes that it's a chimera, a weapon created in Galia long ago by stitching different monsters together like a typical backyard science project. Fate checks its stats and is shocked as they are absolutely insane. But Mine, overestimating Fate's powers, thinks they have a chance since it's still an infant, because apparently fighting a baby chimera sounds way easier. She tells him it's time for him to return the favor, revealing that the chimera can't die as long as its soul is intact. Fate then realizes that she wants him to use his gluttony skill to eat its soul, as if it were just a light snack. Mine launches an attack on the cocoon, revealing the chimera, but it turns out that there's a girl at its core. Fate hesitates, not exactly thrilled about eating a soul with a human face, but Mine is quick to remind him it's just a monster in human skin, so he shouldn't worry about that and just dig in. The chimera retaliates, launching an attack that creates a literal wave of lava, but Mine stops it and slices off one of the chimera's arms, and Fate fires his petrifying arrows, but they don't work and the chimera's arm regenerates. Fate wonders what their next move should be, while Mine continues her assault on the chimera. Fate notices she's even stronger than before, and Greed chimes in, noting that the more she swings Sloth around, the stronger and heavier it gets. Even that's not enough, and the creature starts to evolve. Mine warns Fate to get back, but this reminds him of Roxy, and he realizes he's being saved again. So he decides to finally take a stand for himself and switches to half-starvation mode. However, Mine warns him that it's dangerous, but Fate's never met a bad decision he didn't like. He sacrifices 10% of his stats to shoot an upgraded petrification shot, while Mine activates Sloth and knocks down the chimera. However, the show isn't over and the chimera suddenly uses a barrier skill to protect itself. Fate switches to his side to cut through the barrier, but it pushes him back. Greed, always the helpful sidekick, advises him to aim for the flow of mana. Fate shatters the barrier, but the girl cries out in pain. The chimera starts to take off, while Fate is reaching his limit. Mine, clearly the muscle in this duo, tells him to hop on her axe and launches him into the sky like a chimera-slaying superhero. Greed informs Fate that he can now use the second stage of his ultimate skill, but it'll cost him another 20% of his stats. Fate is desperate, so he agrees and upgrades his scythe. As he closes in on the chimera, it traps him in a barrier, preparing to burn them both to a crisp. But Fate delivers the finishing blow, stabbing the girl at its core. But this triggers Fate's telepathy skill. Through the connection, we see the girl's past, and it turns out she knew Mine. Fate's gluttony skill kicks in, but instead of his usual rush of excitement, he just feels her loneliness. Greed comments that it's because she was one of his kin. Later, we see Mine at the girl's grave, and Fate, playing detective, asks how she knew the girl. Mine brushes it off, saying it was a long time ago. She mentions that once someone becomes a chimera, they must be taken out, or they'll only cause more suffering. Fate, now extra paranoid, wonders if this could happen to him and asks Mine to kill him if he ever loses himself. Mine feels pity for him, so she hugs him but also agrees to his request. Fate prepares to head for Babylon, but Mine plans to rebuild her village. She gives him a darkly humorous farewell, saying she has a feeling he'll be dead before they meet again. We also learn that Fate unlocked Greed's new form, which is a magic shield. But Mine calls him an idiot for resetting his stats in such a dangerous place, and Fate, in true Fate fashion, begs her to help him hunt so he can regain his stats. The two end up splitting up, and Fate eventually makes it to the city of Babylon, the fortress that separates the kingdom from Galia. Once inside, Fate's jaw drops at how expensive everything is compared to the capital. Just when he's ready to start a side hustle, there's an announcement that the new lord has arrived. The crowd is excited to see Roxy, but Fate suddenly senses a strange presence. It seems someone's out for Roxy's life and there is a chance that she might die there. We learn that there are criminals gathering at the city of Babylon because their crimes would be forgiven if they prove their strength. Fate thinks that the soldiers need all the help they can get, so he believes this is the perfect place for him. We cut to Roxy as she meets the Holy Knight Alistair, who is the officer in charge of Babylon. He reveals he was there when her father was killed, saying he feels guilty for failing to protect him. But she tells him not to worry, saying she is going to help him fight the monsters, and they agree to work together. Meanwhile, Fate notices a scabbard, and Greed tells him to buy it. He He meets the shopkeeper Jade and inquires about the item, but Jade tells him that it's only there for display, saying he can create one for Fate's sword. Fate shows him greed, and Jade thinks the sword is amazing, saying he can create a scabbard for 500 gold coins. However, Fate can't afford it, so he decides to leave and complains about how everything is so expensive in the city. A band of warriors calls out to him, and they are about to invite him to join their party, but they think he looks weak, so they decide not to work with him. While going on a hunt, Fate notices something in the air as Greed explains that the spores in the area are toxic, advising him not to inhale them. He encounters a group of orcs, so he prepares to take them on. But the warriors suddenly arrive and start killing the monsters. However, he sees another group approaching, thinking they are planning to surround the warriors. He charges in as they fire arrows at him, but he uses Greed's new magic shield form, destroying the arrows. Greed claims he can withstand any attack in this form and advises Fate to rush the orcs. Fate dashes forward, blocking their attacks as he rams his shield into them, taking them all out in an instant. After the fight, he wonders why his gluttony skill didn't act up, because he usually struggles after consuming plenty of souls, thinking it must be because of his training with Aaron. He goes to the exchange, planning to sell his loot, but the warriors accuse him of stealing, saying the goods belong to them. He tells them to back off, but they continue to pester him, threatening to kill him, so he beats them up. He receives 100 gold coins for his loot. At that moment, Roxy enters the room, asking him if he's responsible for the mess, but he explains that he acted in self-defense. She feels responsible for being unable to maintain order in the city, so she decides not to punish him but tells the warriors they are going to spend the night in prison, saying they should reflect on their actions. Mia tells Fate to remove his mask, but Roxy tells him that it won't be necessary. As she inquires about his identity, he tells her that his name is Corpse, and she finds him strange, advising him to take care of his appearance because he looks like a mess. We see him walking around the city, and he is glad that Roxy wasn't able to recognize him. However, he thinks about his appearance, realizing he can't afford to clean himself up. At that moment, Jade approaches him, revealing that he has just opened his shop. He tells Fate that he has an offer for him. He takes Fate to his shop, saying he knows what happened in the exchange, so he sees potential in Fate, asking if he can wear a suit of armor for advertising. Fate agrees to work with Jade, so Jade gives him a suit of armor, saying he can have it for 80 gold coins. Fate is surprised that Jade is charging him because he thought it was free, but after seeing his reaction, Jade agrees to give him a discount. While walking around the city, Fate notices a group of people gathering at a tavern, so he decides to check it out. However, he gets a strange feeling when he sees a girl. The girl approaches him, telling him that she's been waiting for him and already knows who he is. She introduces herself as Eris, the sin of lust. They spend time together, and Fate notes that he gets a strange feeling whenever he looks at her. She explains that this is a side effect of her lust skill, revealing that people fall in love whenever they look at her. She reveals that she has been watching him for a long time, knowing he defeated the Chimera. But she tells him that there are more Chimeras in Galia, and she thinks the Holy Knights aren't strong enough to defeat them. Eris tells him the reason she's been waiting for him, revealing that she is a guardian of the kingdom and is working towards a better future. She says that Roxy's death would benefit the kingdom, telling him that she needs to die in Galia. Fate becomes upset, wondering if she plans to kill her. Eris explains the phenomenon of aggression, saying a monster's hatred lingers after it dies and accumulates over the years until a crowned beast is born. She tells him that this can also occur for humans, explaining that the people hate the Holy Knights, and Roxy is the only one they love. Her death would accumulate more aggression, which would give birth to a powerful human who will serve the kingdom in the future. However, Fate doesn't want her to die, so he becomes furious and decides to leave. Eris notes that the plan is already in motion, and nothing can stop it. Alistair reports that they have lost contact with the material gathering squad at the Great Canyon in Galia. Roxy worries for them, so she immediately orders a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Jade tells Fate about the Duskstone material needed for his scabbard but notes that he's run out of it. Greed suggests finding the Duskstone themselves, and we learn that it can only be found in Galia. Jade marks a map for them, and they prepare to head off. Along their way, they come across more orcs, but Fate easily runs through them with his shield. We see Roxy's group heading to the Great Canyon, but they seem to have trouble navigating because compasses don't work in Galia. However, Roxy notes that they can approximate their location by the concentration of orcs, as there's an orc colony near the canyon, so the more orcs there are, the closer they should be. Fate rests for the night but finds himself in a strange dream. He sees the girl from the Chimera and she tries to tell him something, but he isn't able to hear what she's saying. Suddenly, everything turns red and foes emerge, dragging him down into the water. He wakes up from the dream, wondering what it meant, but he detects monsters approaching. Using his night vision skill, he sees 4 salamanders closing in. He shoots one of them with his petrification arrows but notes that they're behaving strangely, as they would usually run after receiving such an attack. Greed thinks they're being controlled. The salamanders arrive at Roxy's camp and surround them on all sides. The salamanders breathe fire, causing chaos, but Mia tries to fight back with her magic sword. However, it has no effect and she is blown away. The salamander prepares to bite them, but Fate arrives just in time. He manages to take out the salamanders, and Roxy thanks him for saving them. Fate points out the markings on the salamanders' heads, and the others find it strange that 4 crown beasts would be working together, especially since they seem to be targeting Roxy. They manage to make it to the Great Canyon and go their separate ways. Fate continues to explore and finds monsters that have been petrified. He sees Eris up ahead, wondering what she's doing there, but he loses track of her. He suddenly notices a chimera, but it doesn't move, and Greed notes that it doesn't have a core. However, there are 2 other holes in the wall, suggesting there are 2 more chimeras. The ground suddenly shakes, and there's an explosion in Roxy's direction, so Fate rushes to find them. We see Roxy's group being attacked by the 2 chimeras, and Mugen gets hurt trying to protect Mia. Fate arrives to save them, shooting at the chimeras. Greed notes that their regeneration is slower than the other chimera they fought. Fate tells Roxy about the chimera's weakness, advising her to aim for their core. They charge in together, and the chimera creates fire around them, but Fate has resistance against it. The chimera tries to protect its core, but Fate cuts its legs, creating an opening, and Roxy delivers the finishing blow. There's 1 more chimera left, but it suddenly jumps into the sky. They prepare to attack it as it lands, but it ends up causing the ground to split. Fate and Roxy fall through, but Fate grabs onto Roxy to protect her with his body. When Fate wakes up, he sees how far they fell and starts to panic when he notices his mask is gone. Roxy wakes up, but he manages to find his mask. He uses his fire magic to light up the area and asks if she managed to find her lost squad, but she tells him she couldn't save them. She asks how he knows so much about the chimeras, and he tells her that a Galian told him about them. Roxy deduces that it was mine and mentions the rumors that she was traveling with a man wearing a skull mask. Fate admits it was him, and Roxy is pleased she guessed correctly. Fate gets embarrassed from her staring, but she mentions how he reminds her of someone she knows. She thinks about him, hoping he is happy, and Fate calls the person she's thinking about lucky. However, his gluttony starts acting up as one of his eyes turns red. He doesn't want Roxy to see him like this, so he runs away, sensing that the chimera is nearby. The chimera emerges, but using his sai, he attacks its core while thinking about the way Roxy would look at him. He takes out the chimera but notices the same marking from the salamanders, so Greed deduces that Roxy is being targeted, and Fate knows it must be Iris' doing. Roxy catches up with him, and they end up finding the dusk stone he was looking for. They return to the city. The next day, Roxy challenges Fate to a duel as Mia tells him that he has been causing trouble in the city, but he explains that he was just defending himself, saying there are people after him. Roxy tells him that she can't overlook his actions, suggesting he should join her army because nobody wants to mess with them. However, he refuses, so she prepares to fight him, telling him to draw his sword. He leaves it in the scabbard, which makes her think he's underestimating her. She tells him she won't hold back, and they start to fight. Fate wonders why he can't overpower her because his stats are supposed to be higher. He realizes that her technique is superior, and she manages to land a hit, leaving a crack on his mask. She threatens to expose him if he doesn't fight seriously, so he unleashes the power of his scabbard. Everyone recognizes it as a holy sword skill as he explains that the scabbard is made from dusk stone and improves his holy sword techniques. He charges at her, managing to overpower her, but as he prepares to end the fight, he sees the amulet she's wearing and recognizes it, causing him to become distracted. Roxy disarms him, securing victory, but she wonders why he let his guard down. He refuses to answer, and she recognizes his fighting style, asking if he learned it from Eren. She reveals that she encountered Eren during her journey, and he mentioned a traveler with immense power, wondering if Fate is that person. He tells her to focus on her mission. Fate talks to Mugen, telling him that someone was controlling the Chimera. Mugen explains that it was using a monster as its core and says his family studied Galan technology, noting that Rain is a gifted scholar. Fate knows that chimeras are artificial creatures made in Galia, so he wants to meet her. Meanwhile, we see Rain in the lab as her colleague tells her about Raphael, who is studying the Philosopher's Stone. She decides to look into it, and we learn that the stone grants its wielder extraordinary powers but completely dominates their body. We return to Fate as he recalls his conversation with Mine, where she told him about the Domain of E, saying he won't be able to defeat the Divine Dragon until he reaches it. He wonders how he's supposed to reach that level, but at that moment, everyone hears an alarm. Alistair tells Roxy that monsters are approaching the city, so she gathers her men and charges at the monsters. Fate watches from a distance, thinking she should be able to win the battle, but he sees a huge monster moving underground, approaching her army and threatening to launch a surprise attack. He decides to interfere. Greed transforms into a bow, and Fate uses his gluttony skill to strengthen the arrow, allowing him to launch a powerful shot from a distance. The arrow pierces through the ground and hits the monster, forcing it to surface. He lunges at the monster and uses his Identify skill, allowing him to see its stats. He realizes that it's extremely strong and that Roxy doesn't stand a chance. The monster summons an acid rain, so Fate defends using his shield. Greed explains that it's using corrosion magic and warns Fate to be careful, as he will die if he touches it. Fate decides to use his magic bow and fires a powerful arrow, causing an explosion. However, the monster disappears and tries to escape. Fate realizes that it survived by splitting its body and is heading for Roxy, so he chases after it. The monster uses smaller copies to attack him, but he uses his Grand Cross skill to destroy them in an instant. Fate realizes it's not behaving like a normal monster, so he thinks it's being controlled. He jumps into the ground, trying to locate the monster's core, and prepares to launch his most powerful arrow. The monster reappears, and just as Fate is about to finish it off, he sees bullets hitting the monster. The arrow causes an explosion, and a voice tells him that he has consumed the monster's soul, but it's still alive. Fate becomes confused, wondering how it can survive without its soul. He sees a masked man watching him, so Fate lunges at him. Greed recognizes the weapon the man is using as the mortal sin, Envy. The monster surrounds Fate as Greed explains that it was hit by a magic bullet, which activated its hidden power, allowing it to create copies of its soul. The monster attacks, trying to melt Fate's body, but he consumes the monster instead, revealing that he has found a way to counter its corrosion magic. Fate shoots at the man, but a barrier protects him. Greed explains that Fate's stats have reached their limit, and he will need to reach the Domain of E to go any further. Fate, however, is still no match for the man, who is already at that level. Fate charges in, but the man blocks his attack and pushes him away. The man uses Envy to fire magic bullets, and though Fate tries to block with his shield, he still feels the force of the attack, coughing up blood. As the man prepares to finish him off, Fate realizes that he needs to get stronger. He bargains with his gluttony skill, saying he's willing to do whatever it takes to break his limit. He begs Gluttony to give him the power he needs, and he reaches the Domain of E. He attacks the man, forcing him to retreat. The man summons monsters to attack Fate, but Fate tells them not to interfere and runs right past them. He continues to pursue the man, dodging his magic bullets and creating a smoke screen to obscure his vision. Fate appears behind the man, destroying his mask and revealing his identity as Alistair. However, Alistair isn't bothered by the setback and plays a flute, causing the Divine Dragon to appear. It makes its way toward Roxy, so Fate rushes to reach her, but Alistair tries to stop him. Meanwhile, we see Roxy's army fighting the monsters as the Divine Dragon approaches. Mugen orders everyone to retreat, but the dragon fires a powerful energy beam, blowing everyone away. Fate protects Roxy with his shield, and the force of the attack causes his mask to break, revealing his secret. Roxy is surprised to see him and is shocked as she looks into his eyes. Fate then smiles and turns around to greet her. He apologizes for lying to her but tells her to retreat while he buys time. He goes to confront the dragon using his Grand Cross skill and manages to hold it in a prison. Alistair shoots at him, and the two start fighting once again, but Fate seems to struggle. Alistair notes that he's using too much power maintaining his skill, so he doesn't stand a chance. Fate fails to land a hit, and Alistair cuts off his arm. Alistair prepares to finish him off, but he suddenly gets stabbed from behind as Fate reveals he used illusion magic and cuts Alistair down. His gluttony skill activates, and Fate suddenly finds himself surrounded by white. He sees the girl from Mine's memory again, and she introduces herself as Luna. She thanks him for killing her but apologizes as the floor cracks, saying she can no longer hold on. Fate realizes that she was the one stopping his gluttony from going berserk, and she warns him that if he devours the divine dragon, he will lose himself. The floor crumbles, but Fate is caught by Greed. Fate is shocked to see him, but Greed tells him they need to leave. Fate thanks Luna for her warning but resolves to defeat the dragon. They make it back outside, but the dragon breaks free from his skill. Greed wonders what Fate will do with only one arm, but Fate suddenly throws him. Fate charges in, punching the dragon, and proceeds to cut it up. As the dragon falls down, it fires an energy blast at him, but Fate boosts his stats using his overload skill, cutting through the blast and splitting the dragon in half. The dragon falls through the ground, and Fate's gluttony devours its soul. He feels intense pain and is about to go berserk, but he sacrifices all his stats to unlock Greed's final form to prevent himself from causing damage. Mine appears, noting that Fate has let his skill consume him, and Fate asks her to finish him off. She prepares to keep their promise, but Roxy suddenly saves him. He tells her not to look at him, but she cries for him, saying she doesn't care what kind of power he has and that she likes him for who he is, telling him not to die. Strangely, Fate feels his gluttony calming down, and Roxy tells him to go back with her. He's relieved she accepts him after learning the truth, and he collapses in her lap. When Fate wakes up, he finds himself back in the city. He's visited by Eris and Mine, who tell him he's been asleep for a whole week. Eris hands him Greed, and Fate notes how dirty he is. Eris mentions how Mine forgot to bring Greed back, but she notes she was busy dealing with Envy, revealing it has the power to mind control, and that Alistair was being manipulated. Fate wonders what she did with Envy since it's indestructible, and Mine reveals she just threw it away. Eris notes that since the crowned human experiment using Roxy was a failure, they will need Fate's help in the future, and Fate agrees on the condition that Eris promises to leave Roxy alone. Eris tells him they should leave before Roxy gets back, saying it's dangerous for him to see her because it seems just hearing her name makes his gluttony unstable. We see Roxy come to visit him, but he's already gone, and she finds a note from him. He explains everything about his skill to her, promising to return to her one day, and she thinks about how she always got courage from him. We see a flashback to when they first met. Fate is scared of her at first, thinking all holy knights are bullies, and she realizes how people see them. She's ashamed and apologizes to him, but his stomach growls, so she ends up giving him her food. He's glad he was able to meet a good holy knight, and she's able to be proud of herself. She wonders when they will meet again and promises to get stronger so she can protect him. We see Fate using Greed's new staff form, and he's able to restore his arm. Eris and Mine go their separate ways, and Fate sets off with Greed to find a way to control his gluttony. Thanks for watching, my fellow plot boys, and don't forget to subscribe for more top-notch quality anime recaps. And until next time guys, take care.